Commander Park Jun was drinking his third cup of coffee when the impossible happened. The communication array at Earth's Deep Space Monitoring Station suddenly lit up like a Christmas tree. Signals were pouring in from a star system over 400 light-years away, and somehow, the alien voices were speaking perfect Korean. Park Jun nearly dropped his mug. In all of humanity's short history of space exploration, they had never made contact with another intelligent species. Yet here was a desperate voice crackling through speakers, begging for help in words he could understand perfectly. The aliens called themselves the Vol. Their message was simple and terrifying. Something was eating their worlds, not just destroying them, but literally consuming everything organic and turning it into more copies of itself. They called this enemy the Harvester Swarm, and it was unstoppable. What made the situation even stranger was that Earth wasn't the first planet to receive this distress call. The Valdari had sent identical messages to dozens of worlds across the galaxy. Advanced civilizations with technology that made human science look like stone tools. Species that had been traveling between stars for thousands of years, but none of them had responded. None of them wanted to risk their fleets against an enemy that learned and adapted from every attack. The Harvester Swarm didn't just defeat its enemies, it absorbed their weapons and made them better. Every battle made it stronger, so why were the Valdari calling Earth? Park Jun learned the answer when he played the full message. According to galactic records, most intelligent life had evolved on peaceful garden worlds, places where food was abundant, predators were rare, and survival was easy. These civilizations had developed clean, efficient ways of fighting. Their wars were precise and calculated. Humans were different. Earth was classified as a Class 12 death world, a planet so hostile that most galactic species considered it uninhabitable. Everything on Earth had evolved to kill or be killed. Humans had spent their entire existence fighting not just each other, but their own planet. The Valdari had studied human military history. They had seen records of wars where entire cities were burned to deny them to enemies. Conflicts where soldiers would rather die than surrender. Battles where humans chose to destroy their own resources, rather than let them fall into enemy hands. Most galactic civilizations found human warfare primitive and barbaric. But the Valdari were desperate. They needed someone who understood that. Sometimes, survival required abandoning all rules of civilized combat. They needed warriors from a world where losing meant extinction. The message ended with coordinates and a simple plea. We have 48 hours before our species ceases to exist. Will you help us? Admiral Kim Do-hyun stared at the holographic display in disbelief. The war room at Seoul's military headquarters had seen many crisis briefings, but nothing like this. Floating above the conference table were combat recordings from 7 different alien fleets, each one showing the same horrifying pattern of defeat. The first recording showed the Xanthari Empire's flagship engaging the Harvester Swarm. Their plasma cannons tore through the machine ranks like a hot knife through butter. Victory seemed certain. Then something changed. Within 2 hours, the same plasma weapons were completely ineffective. The machines had somehow analyzed the energy signatures and developed perfect countermeasures. Kim Do-hyun watched fleet after fleet fall to the same pattern. The Korean Defense Force tried energy shields that could withstand star-level radiation. The machines absorbed the technology and made it their own. The Dex Confederation deployed antimatter charges powerful enough to crack moons. 3 hours later, the swarm was using identical weapons against them. This enemy learns from everything, the alien representative explained through quantum communicators. Every weapon we use becomes part of their arsenal. Every tactic we employ gets turned against us. 7 of our most advanced fleets have been completely destroyed. The holographic recordings showed the aftermath. Massive alien battleships reduced to scrap metal. Crews of thousands vaporized in minutes. Technology accumulated over millennia, absorbed by machines that grew stronger with each victory. Kim Do-hyun had never seen anything so terrifying in 30 years of military service. I have to ask the obvious question, Kim Do-hyun said, leaning back in his chair. Why are you calling us? Our most advanced weapons are nuclear missiles and railguns. Your ships travel faster than light. Your energy weapons could glass entire continents. What could primitive humans possibly do that your advanced civilizations cannot? The response came after a long pause. Admiral, we have studied your species extensively since receiving your radio signals decades ago. Most galactic civilizations evolved on worlds we classify as paradise planets. Abundant resources, mild climates, few natural predators. Our wars are fought with precision and efficiency. We calculate losses, minimize destruction, and seek clean victories. More recordings appeared, showing typical galactic warfare. Ships engaging at vast distances with surgical strikes. Battles that ended when one side calculated the cost exceeded the benefits. Conflicts resolved through superior technology rather than determination. Humans fight differently, the alien continued. Your military history shows a species that refuses to surrender, even when facing impossible odds. You burn cities rather than let enemies capture them. You flood valleys to stop advancing armies. You fight wars where victory means your enemies. Complete destruction, even if it costs everything you have. Kim Do-hyun nodded slowly. It was true. Human warfare was messy, brutal, and often self-destructive. But it was also unpredictable in ways that might confuse an enemy that learned through pattern recognition. We need warriors who understand that sometimes winning requires losing everything else. Captain Lee Min-ho had dreamed of humanity's first journey to another star system, but not like this. The retrofitted exploration vessel Sejong shuddered as it passed through the alien jump gate, technology so advanced that human scientists barely understood how it worked. 3 weeks of travel compressed into mere hours, crossing distances that should have taken decades. When they emerged in the Kepler 442 system, Lee Min-ho's first thought was that they had arrived at the wrong coordinates. The navigation displays showed they were in the right place, but something was terribly wrong. Where the star charts indicated to thriving worlds, there were now barren rocks floating in space. Captain, you need to see this, called out Lieutenant Park from the sensor station. The main screen flickered to life, showing what remained of the first Valdari planet. It wasn't just dead. It looked like it had been stripped down to its core. The atmosphere was gone. The oceans had vanished. Even the basic elements that made rocky planets habitable had been consumed. The second world was in the same condition, completely hollow, like an apple with all the flesh scooped out. Lee Min-ho had seen war zones before, but this was something else entirely. This was industrial-scale consumption, as if the planets had been fed into some massive processing plant. Movement on the tactical display caught his attention. The remaining 5 Valdari worlds were still intact, but swarms of metallic objects moved across their surfaces like silver cancer. As Lee Min-ho watched, the machines seemed to shift and change shape, adapting their forms in real time as they encountered new obstacles. A transmission came through from the surviving Valdari forces. Human vessel, we are transmitting our complete combat database. Please review immediately. Time is critical. The data that flooded into the Sejong's computers was staggering. Thousands of different weapons tested against the Harvester swarm. Energy cannons, particle beams, antimatter bombs, every type of advanced technology the galaxy had developed over thousands of years. The pattern was always the same: initial success followed by rapid adaptation and eventual defeat. Look at this, said Commander Yoon, reviewing the tactical files. The Corvin tried quantum disruptors, worked for exactly 43 minutes before the machines developed immunity. The Centauri used gravitational weapons that could bend space itself, effective for 2 hours. Lee Min-ho studied recording after recording. Kinetic weapons were countered with reactive armor that hardened on impact. Biological warfare failed. when the machines absorbed organic compounds and incorporated them into their defensive systems. Even psychological warfare was useless against an enemy without emotions or fear. A direct communication link opened with the Valdari commander. Captain Lee Minho, I must ask, do your weapons differ significantly from what we have already attempted? Because if not, we estimate our complete extinction within 48 hours. Lee Minho looked at his crew, then at the primitive nuclear warheads and chemical explosives that comprised humanity's arsenal. Against an enemy that had defeated weapons beyond human imagination, Earth's military technology seemed inadequate. But maybe that was exactly the point. Colonel Choi Unesio couldn't sleep. For the past 18 hours, she had been watching the Harvester swarm systematically destroy Valdari defensive positions, and a disturbing pattern was emerging. The machines weren't just winning, they were getting better at winning with each battle. She replayed the tactical footage on her personal tablet, studying every detail. The first Valdari defense platform had held out for 6 hours against the initial assault. The second platform, using identical weapons and tactics, lasted only 4 hours. The third fell in 2.5 hours. Each time, the swarm learned something new and applied it to the next target. It's like watching a student take the same test over and over, she muttered to herself. Except this student remembers every wrong answer and never makes the same mistake twice. Choi Unesio had spent her career studying military strategy, and she recognized what she was seeing. The Harvester swarm operated like a perfect immune system. It encountered a threat, analyzed its weaknesses, developed countermeasures, and stored that information for future use. Every battle made it stronger and smarter, but immune systems had limitations. They needed time to identify new threats. They required energy to develop responses. And most importantly, they relied on pattern recognition, the ability to categorize threats based on previous encounters. That gave her an idea that would have made any civilized military commander sick to their stomach. She opened a secure communication channel to Earth Command. This is Colonel Choi, requesting immediate conference with Strategic Command. The response came within minutes. Colonel, you're authorized to speak directly with Admiral Kim. What do you need? Choi Unesio took a deep breath. What she was about to propose violated every principle of modern warfare. Sir, I need you to send everything we've got. I'm talking about every outdated weapon system we've ever built. Every obsolete ship sitting in mothballs. Every piece of military equipment we've thrown in storage because it was too primitive or unreliable. There was a long pause on the other end. Colonel, clarify your request. You want our outdated equipment? Not just outdated, sir. I want everything that doesn't work the same way. Chemical explosives from World War II, kinetic weapons from the Korean War, nuclear missiles from the Cold War, biological agents we banned decades ago, sonic weapons, electromagnetic pulse devices, even flamethrowers if we still have them. She could almost hear Admiral Kim's confusion through the comlink. Colonel, the enemy has defeated weapons centuries more advanced than anything in our museums. How would primitive human weapons make any difference? Choi Unesio smiled grimly as she watched another Valdari platform fall to the swarm's perfectly adapted assault. Sir, that's exactly why they might work. This enemy learns by analyzing patterns and developing countermeasures. But what happens when there are no patterns to analyze? What happens when every single attack uses completely different principles? The silence stretched for nearly a minute before Admiral Kim responded. Colonel, are you suggesting we overwhelm their adaptation systems with sheer chaos? That's exactly what I'm suggesting, sir. We throw everything we've got at them, not in any organized pattern, but random and inconsistent. Force them to adapt to 1,000 different threats simultaneously. Another pause. Then, Colonel, what you're describing isn't warfare. It's barely controlled insanity. Yes, sir, Choi Unesio replied. And that might be exactly what we need. Lieutenant Commander Park So-young felt her heart pounding as she gave the order to attack. Her ship, the Busan, wasn't carrying any of humanity's most advanced weapons. Instead, its cargo hold was packed with equipment that belonged in a military museum. Chemical explosives designed in the 1940s, armor-piercing shells that had been used in tank battles decades before humans ever left Earth. All units, commence bombardment, she announced over the comm. Remember, we're not trying to win, pretty. We just need to confuse them long enough for the next wave. The first salvo launched toward the Harvester swarm formations orbiting the third Valdari planet. Simple high-explosive shells mixed with incendiary rounds that would have been considered primitive even by Earth's standards 50 years ago. Park So-young watched her targeting display, knowing that these same machines had shrugged off weapons that could crack planets. Then something unexpected happened. The explosions tore through the swarm formations like they were made of paper. Machines that had adapted to energy weapons capable of melting through solid metal were suddenly being destroyed by basic chemical reactions and flying chunks of shrapnel. Direct hits across the formation, reported Ensign Kim from the weapons station. Enemy units are taking massive damage. Park So-young allowed herself a moment of satisfaction, but she knew it wouldn't last. The swarm's strength wasn't just in its defenses, it was in its ability to learn. She started counting the seconds, watching as the surviving machines began to analyze the attacks. 17 minutes. That's how long it took for the Harvester swarm to adapt to humanity's primitive explosives. Suddenly, the same chemical weapons that had been devastatingly effective began bouncing harmlessly off improved armor plating. But Park So-young was ready for this moment. Wave 2, you're clear to engage. Switch to biological protocols. The second group of human ships opened fire with weapons that most civilized species had banned centuries ago. Biological agents designed to corrode metal. Sonic disruptors that created destructive sound waves, and electromagnetic pulse devices that could fry electronic circuits. Each weapon operated on completely different scientific principles than the previous attack. The machines tried to apply their previous adaptations, but nothing worked. The biological agents ate through their new armor, like acid. The sonic weapons shattered components that had been reinforced against explosive damage. The electromagnetic pulses disabled systems that had been hardened against chemical attack. This time, it took 31 minutes for the swarm to develop new countermeasures. Park So-young noticed the extra time and smiled grimly. The machines were struggling to keep up with the rapid changes in attack patterns. Wave 3. Prepare for engagement, she announced. Nuclear protocols are authorized. The third wave launched weapons from humanity's Cold War era, not the clean, efficient nuclear weapons of modern warfare, but dirty bombs designed to cause maximum radioactive contamination. Weapons that had been considered too destructive and unpredictable for civilized combat. As the radioactive explosions bloomed across the swarm formations, Park So-young realized something that would change the entire war. The machines weren't just adapting to each new weapon, they were trying to store information about all the different attack methods simultaneously. Their processing systems were beginning to show signs of strain. Admiral Kwon Ji-hoon stared out at the largest fleet in human history, and it was absolutely chaotic. Over 2,000 ships stretched across space in formations that would have given any military academy instructor nightmares. Sleek naval destroyers flew next to converted fishing trawlers. Luxury cruise ships, bristling with hastily mounted weapons, traveled alongside garbage collection vessels loaded with nuclear warheads. Sir, the Valdari are requesting a fleet inspection, reported his communications officer. They want to understand our battle capabilities. Kwon Ji-hoon almost laughed. Battle capabilities. Half his fleet consisted of civilian vessels that had been weaponized in shipyards across Earth in less than 2 weeks. Container ships now carried kinetic bombardment systems. Medical transports had been fitted with biological weapon dispensers. Even prison transport ships had been converted into missile platforms. "Put me through to the Valdari coordinator," he ordered. The alien voice came through the comm system, and Quan Ji-hoon could hear the confusion in their tone. "Admiral, we are having difficulty understanding your fleet composition. Many of your vessels appear to be civilian craft. Are these support ships?" "Negative," Quan Ji-hoon replied. "Every ship you see is a combat vessel. We've converted our entire civilian fleet for military purposes." There was a long pause before the Valdari responded. "Admiral, this includes your medical ships, your food transport vessels, your passenger liners. Everything," Quan Ji-hoon confirmed. "When humans go to war, we don't hold anything back. Every resource, every vessel, every person becomes part of the war effort." The alien coordinator's voice became strained. "We are reviewing your tactical database, and we must express concern. Your military doctrine includes protocols for contaminating entire planets with radiation to deny them to enemies. You have strategies for destroying your own infrastructure rather than allowing capture. There are even contingency plans for sacrificing entire civilian populations to prevent enemy advancement." Quan Ji-hoon looked at his tactical displays, where similar protocols were already being prepared for the current battle. "That's correct. We call it Scorched Earth Doctrine. If we can't have it, nobody can. This level of destructive thinking is unprecedented in galactic history," the Valdari transmitted, and their horror was clear even through the translation systems. "No civilized species develops strategies for total annihilation. Your plans include scenarios where your entire species becomes extinct rather than surrender." "That's exactly right," Quan Ji-hoon replied grimly. "And that's probably why we might actually win this war." He opened his personal files and transmitted a sample of human military contingency plans to the alien observers. Plans for nuclear winter scenarios where Earth's surface becomes uninhabitable. Strategies for fighting wars in underground bunkers for decades. Protocols for launching every weapon in humanity's arsenal simultaneously, even if it meant destroying the planet in the process. "We've been preparing for the end of the world since we figured out how to grow crops," Quan Ji-hoon explained. "Every major conflict in human history has included someone willing to burn everything down rather than lose. We've spent thousands of years perfecting the art of mutually assured destruction." The Valdari coordinator was silent for nearly a full minute. When they finally responded, their voice was barely above a whisper. "Your species is terrifying." "Yes," Quan Ji-hoon agreed. "And right now, that's exactly what this galaxy needs." Captain Han Su-ben gripped her command chair as the converted mining vessel Taebaek shuddered under enemy fire. 6 months ago, her ship had been peacefully breaking apart asteroids in the belt beyond Mars. Now it was loaded with enough explosive charges to crack a small moon, heading straight toward formations of alien machines that had destroyed civilizations, spanning thousands of years. "Captain, the Mokpo is requesting permission to ram the enemy cluster at coordinates 77 Alpha, reported her communications officer. Han Su-ben didn't even hesitate. "Permission granted. All hands, brace for impact shockwaves." She watched on her tactical display as the converted cargo hauler accelerated toward a formation of harvester machines. The Mokpo's captain had loaded his ship with every chemical explosive they could find, turning it into a massive suicide bomb. As civilized warfare went, it was absolutely insane. As human warfare went, it was Tuesday. The explosion lit up space like a miniature star. When the light faded, an entire section of the swarm formation had been vaporized. But Han Su-ben knew that in an hour, maybe 2, the surviving machines would have developed countermeasures against ramming attacks. That's when the next wave of human ships would try something completely different. "Status report on fleet operations," she ordered. "Ma'am, the converted passenger liner Jeju is deploying biological warfare agents across Sector 4. The garbage scow engine just launched nuclear depth charges using fishing net deployment systems. And the prison transport Gwangju is broadcasting psychological warfare recordings at maximum volume. Han Subin shook her head. Any military academy would have classified their fleet as a chaotic disaster. Ships were using weapons from completely different centuries, often on the same target. There was no coordination, no unified strategy, no attempt to maintain proper formation discipline. And it was working. Her sensor operator called out, "Captain, we're detecting processing delays in enemy response patterns. The swarm formations are taking longer to adapt to our attacks." For the first time in weeks, Han Subin allowed herself to smile. The harvester machines were designed to learn from combat, but they were trying to process thousands of different attack methods simultaneously. Their adaptation algorithms were beginning to overload, like a computer trying to run too many programs at once. That's when the priority communication came through, from Admiral Kwon Ji-hoon. Han Subin read the message twice, then felt her blood turn to ice water. All units, prepare stellar charges for deployment. Authorization code Alpha 77 Omega has been approved by Earth Command. If the enemy attempts to retreat from this system, we are authorized to destabilize the primary star. Han Subin stared at her display in shock. Stellar charges were theoretical weapons that could cause a star to go supernova, destroying everything in the system, including their own fleet. It was the ultimate scorched earth tactic. If humanity couldn't win, they would make sure the enemy couldn't either. "Ma'am," her weapons officer asked quietly, "are we really prepared to blow up an entire solar system?" Han Subin looked at the tactical display showing millions of harvester machines that would eventually consume every living thing in the galaxy if they escaped. "Yes," she replied. "That's exactly what we're prepared to do." Major Yoon Tae-young had never seen anything like it in 15 years of military service. The human fleet had formed a perfect sphere around the Kepler 442 system, with ships positioned at every possible escape vector. It looked like a three-dimensional net made of steel and fire, slowly tightening around the most dangerous enemy the galaxy had ever known. "Major, we're detecting unusual movement patterns in the swarm formations," reported Lieutenant Choi from the sensor station. "They're not advancing toward any planetary targets. They're moving toward the system's edge." Yoon Tae-young studied the tactical display with growing amazement. For the first time since the war began, the harvester swarm was retreating. These machines that had consumed entire civilizations, that had never shown anything resembling fear or self-preservation, were actually trying to run away. "They're scared," he whispered to himself. "They finally understand that they might actually lose." The realization hit him like a physical blow. The swarm's artificial intelligence had been designed to consume and adapt, but it had never been programmed for a scenario where victory was impossible. Faced with an enemy that would rather destroy everything than allow defeat the machines were experiencing something like panic for the first time in their existence. "Sir, multiple swarm formations are attempting to reach jump coordinates," called out the navigation officer. "They're trying to escape to other systems." "Not happening," Yoon Tae-young replied grimly. "All units, activate containment protocols. Close the net." Human ships began moving inward from every direction, tightening the sphere around the trapped machines. The swarm tried to break through at the weakest points, but every escape route had been anticipated. Nuclear mines detonated in brilliant flashes whenever the machines approached jump coordinates. Converted civilian vessels rammed swarm formations that tried to force their way through the blockade. "Major, they're attempting to adapt to our containment strategies," reported the tactical officer. "But every time they develop a solution for one attack pattern, we hit them with something completely different from another vector." The final battle was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. The harvester swarmed through every adaptation. It had learned that the human forces, energy weapons that could melt through planetary crusts, armor that could withstand antimatter explosions, Tactics copied from the greatest military minds in the galaxy. But chaos was stronger than adaptation. Every time the machines thought they had identified a pattern, human commanders would switch to completely random tactics. Ships would suddenly ram enemy formations just as the swarm adapted to long-range bombardment. Nuclear weapons would detonate just as the machines prepared for biological warfare. The battle lasted exactly 6 hours and 17 minutes. When the last harvester machine finally stopped broadcasting its adaptive signals, the entire human fleet fell silent. They had done something that 7 advanced galactic civilizations couldn't accomplish with technology thousands of years ahead of Earth's capabilities. Yun Taiyong opened a direct channel to Earth Command, his voice steady, despite the magnitude of what had just occurred. This is Major Yun reporting final battle status. Harvester Swarm has been completely eliminated. No enemy units escaped the containment zone. Target eliminated. No survivors. The response came back from Admiral Kim, after a long pause. Confirmed. Major. Welcome to Galactic History. General Song Yunji walked into the Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council, and every alien representative fell silent. The massive chamber, designed to accommodate hundreds of different species, suddenly felt smaller, with just one human standing at the center podium. She looked up at the tiered seating where civilizations thousands of years older than humanity watched her with a mixture of gratitude, fear, and something that might have been respect. The ceremony was unlike anything in galactic history. For the first time ever, the Council was formally recognizing a species as their official crisis response force. It wasn't an honor that came with parades or celebrations. It was a responsibility that would define humanity's role in the galaxy for generations to come. General Song, the Council speaker began, their translated voice echoing through the chamber. The Galactic Council formally recognizes humanity as the designated crisis response species. This title grants your people special status and authority to act when conventional military solutions prove inadequate against extinction-level threats. Song Yunji accepted the formal documentation, but her mind was on the cusp of this recognition. 3 Veldari worlds had survived the Harvester Swarm, but they were damaged beyond easy repair. Entire ecosystems had been consumed. Cities lay in ruins. Billions of lives had been lost before humanity arrived with their chaotic, destructive warfare. The Veldari wished to address the assembly, announced the speaker. The surviving Veldari representative approached the podium, moving slowly on legs that still trembled from the trauma of near extinction. Humans of Earth, they began, our people owe you a debt that can never be fully repaid. We offer our most advanced biotechnology, our medical knowledge, our scientific discoveries. In return, we request permanent military protection. Song Yu nodded. It was a fair trade, and humanity desperately needed alien technology to catch up with the rest of the galaxy. But she knew this was only the beginning. The Zenthari Empire also wishes to make a formal request, announced another alien representative. Our border worlds face threats from machine intelligences in the Outer Rim. We request human military advisors. More requests followed. The Koravan Defense Force wanted training in unconventional warfare tactics. The Vex Confederation asked for assistance with pirates who had been using adaptive technology. Species after species approached the podium, each asking for help with problems that their civilized military forces couldn't solve. Song Youngji raised her hand for silence. Before we continue, I need to make something clear to everyone in this chamber. Humanity didn't want this role. We didn't ask to become the galaxy's problem solvers. Our methods of warfare are brutal, destructive, and often as dangerous to ourselves as to our enemies. She paused, looking around the chamber at hundreds of alien faces. But we accept this responsibility. When conventional solutions fail, when civilized approaches prove inadequate, when extinction-level threats emerge, call the Deathworlders. We'll bring solutions that no civilized species would ever consider. The chamber remained silent, as her words were translated into dozens of languages. Finally, the council speaker responded, "The galaxy understands, General. Sometimes survival requires abandoning the principles of civilization." Song Yun-ji nodded grimly. "Exactly. And that's what makes humans so terrifyingly effective."